This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News. News-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Good evening, scholars and laymen, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another wonderful edutainment edition of The Artivist Presents. I'm your host for this empowerment segment, Brother Ron, also known as R2C2H2, The Artivist. And we're live on location, or rather we're on location at one of the most hollow and horrific scenes in American history. This is the assassination or crucifixion site of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And why are we here today? Well, or tonight rather, or today period, which will be May the 5th, Cinco de Mayo. Well, we're here because I recently attended the wake for the late Reverend Billy Cowles, Samuel Billy Cowles. His wake was held here at the National Civil Rights Museum. You may or may not know Billy Cowles was one of Dr. King's aides. He also appeared in the documentary Witness Room 306. He was one of the last people to actually talk to Dr. King before he was shot down on the Lorraine Motel balcony behind me. Room 306 behind me, you see that reef that was Dr. King was slain. And he passed away recently at the age of 81 after a long illness. It's interesting because to paraphrase President Harry Truman, the only thing new is the history you don't know. The only thing new is the history you don't know. There has been a lot of controversy over the years about Dr. or Reverend Billy Cowles' involvement in the assassination of Dr. King. People may not be aware that on December 8th, 1999, once again, December 8th, 1999, a court ruled in Memphis that the government was complicit in the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Once again, December 8th, 1999, in civil court, the jurors in 59 minutes found the government complicit in the assassination, the crucifixion of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It was a 30-day civil trial. It was brought by the King family against one Lloyd Jowers. Lloyd Jowers claimed that he was commissioned by the Mafia in New Orleans to put out the hit on Dr. King. And the King family brought a civil suit against Lloyd Jowers for his involvement in Dr. King's death. All they asked really in the suit was $1, but really this one the truth, which is priceless, to come out about what happened to one of our most revered, iconic freedom fighters. Now, a lot of people don't know that, and the transcripts are available online. They were at one point available at the King Center, I believe. I think they're still there, I'm not sure. But do yourself a favor and actually, if you find the court transcripts to the civil trial from 1999, download it, save it in a safe place. A lot of interesting information in that court transcript. Billy Cowles will actually cross-examine during that trial, and some interesting things that come out. Why was Dr. King killed? Well, the best reason why Dr. King was killed because he was planning on bringing almost 500,000 people to Washington, D.C. for the Poor People campaign. He was going to bring 500,000 people to Washington, D.C. for the Poor People campaign. And this was different from the March on Washington just 5 years before. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom was just a rally. The Poor People campaign had the potential to turn into a revolution. Dr. King would not be able to control over 500,000 people I mean, especially think about it, we was overextended in Vietnam. So the powers that be was very afraid of the fact that 500,000 people could actually shut down the power infrastructure in D.C. So they could not allow Dr. King to make his way to D.C. with 500,000 people. So they had to kill him in Memphis. You know, March 28th, he led his last march, which turned out to be violent. It became violent because of agent provocateurs. It was a teenager that was killed in the aftermath of that rally, Larry Payne, in the projects by the police. Dr. King called the mother of Larry Payne to send his condolences. That was Thursday, March 28th, 1968. The next Thursday, April 4th, 1968, Dr. King was dead. So this is where we at. So, like, you know, a lot of people made a big ado some years ago. Billy Cowles, he was on a nationwide news show. I think he was at a press conference in Jackson, and he said something to the effect that you know, when he was leading King from his hotel room or motel room, they was on their way to Billy Cowles' home to eat dinner. And he said something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing, you can actually find this on YouTube online, that he got the way so they could have a clear shot, something to that effect. And, you know, that became an infamous clip, made infamous or popular or amplified by Dick Gregory and Steve Coakley, the world-renowned late great researcher. So they played this clip in one of their presentations and it went viral. So this has stuck to Billy Cowles from that time on, and you can find this stuff online. So my thing is this about the whole thing, about who is involved in killing Dr. King. The white power structure killed Dr. King. White supremacy killed Dr. King. Yeah, you had pawns on the chessboard, of course. Like, you know, it came out several years ago that Ernest Withers, the renowned civil rights photographer, the dean of civil rights photographers, was an FBI informant. But you gotta understand that the FBI contacted everybody back in those times. You can go online and there's an audio tape of Malcolm X talking to the FBI in his home. Malcolm X had enough sense to record these interactions with the FBI. They were trying to get him to turn coat on the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad, and he wouldn't do it. So he took to the pains of recording his conversations with the FBI to document the going on. And also you gotta remember, like people tell me, Ernest Withers was a professional photographer, and he was a photographer for hire. So I mean, anybody could buy a picture for Ernest Withers for a certain amount of money because he was a freelance photographer. So let's say if he was on the FBI payroll, let's look at it from this angle. Let's say the FBI say, you know, FBI agent just went up to him and said, hey, I want to buy this picture, and now can you tell me who's in that picture? Okay, I mean, what y'all think about that? I'm stretching it too far for y'all. And also, Ernest Withers was one of the first black police officers on the Memphis police force. He was one of the first black police officers on the Memphis police force. So he had a background in law enforcement. And I don't think, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think any black person had the power to do what happened on April 4th, 1968. White supremacy does not allow black folks to have self-determination, in being that we could get rid of our leaders without their permission. You know, people say, well, Malcolm X was killed by the Nation of Islam, but did the Nation of Islam have the power to deny Malcolm X entry into France? Who had the power to deny Malcolm X entry into France? Would it be the United States or would it be Elijah Muhammad? Simple as that. The FBI became the FBI not because of the public enemies of the 1930s, was because they took down the greatest threat to white supremacy in the persona of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Marcus Mosiah Garvey was the blood sacrifice for the FBI. The first black FBI agent, James Wormley Jones, known as Agent 800, was hired by the FBI to neutralize Marcus Garvey. Black leadership was used to neutralize Marcus Garvey. So it was black power in the service of white supremacy and white power that actually undermined Marcus Mosiah Garvey, arguably the greatest black mass leader we ever produced. So get back to Malcolm and Dr. King. Dr. King in particular, there's a famous picture that shows Dr. King laying out on the balcony with people pointing across the street, it seems, and with a person kneel over him in that picture. The guy kneeled over Dr. King in that picture. His name is Morrell McCullough. Morrell McCullough was an intelligence agent and an undercover police officer, so to speak. He infiltrated the Memphis Invaders, which was the Memphis version of the Black Panther Party. And Morrell McCullough ended up becoming the first black commissioned CIA officer. He ended up becoming the first black commissioned CIA officer. Normally, the powers that be would have people on the scene to confirm the target has been neutralized or killed. For instance, Malcolm X's chief bodyguard, Eugene Roberts. You can see Eugene Roberts in a photo kneel over Malcolm X, giving him life-to-life resuscitation. Eugene Roberts was undercover police officer for the NYPD for their Bossy program, which was their former COINTELPRO. Eugene Roberts was actually one of the people that framed Afeni Shakur, the mother of Tupac Shakur, and the Panther 21. They got framed by Eugene Roberts. He infiltrated the New York Black Panther Party. So he was able to frame Afeni Shakur and the Panther 21 for trumped-up charges of trying to blow up historic landmarks in New York City. And this was the same guy that was Malcolm X's chief bodyguard on the day he was assassinated, February 21st, 1965. Same thing with Fred Hampton Sr. in Chicago. On December 4th, 1969, the Chicago police raided his home in the morning and shot him in his sleep next to his pregnant fiancee. His chief bodyguard, William O'Neill, was an FBI informant. William O'Neill actually helped fix Fred Hampton Sr.'s last meal, which made him drowsy, so he could not respond to the police when they came in and started shooting up the place, making it look like Swiss cheese. He was just 21 years old at the time. And the FBI, to their credit, knew who Fred Hampton was because they had him under surveillance since he was like 15 or 14 years old. So, I say all this to say, it's the same old, same old. So, yes, black folks were used in neutralizing Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King, and Fred Hampton Sr., but it's the unseen white hand that allowed them, that gave them the permission to neutralize these people for the benefit of white supremacy, global racism. So, like, a lot of times we think too small, we gotta start thinking bigger than what it is. For example, every time Dr. King came to Memphis, he would normally have an all-black security detail, courtesy of the Memphis Police Department. When Dr. King used to come to Memphis, once again, he would normally have an all-black Memphis Police security detail. The last time he came to Memphis, he did not have such a security detail. As a matter of fact, on the day he was assassinated, there was no security detail. Now, you had Officer Ed Redditt that was stationed at the fire station. You had 2 black firemen at that station, but they were removed from the fire station. Officer Ed Redditt, they claimed that he had a hit on his life, so they got him away from the fire station and took him on home. So Dr. King had no type of protection when he was out here, you know, when he got shot. And a lot of people don't understand. It's like I talked to Charles Evers, Medgar Evers' brother. Charles Evers is almost 100 years old, and he's a proud Republican and gun owner. And he said when Dr. King used to come to Jackson, Dr. King used to run to his house because that's where he had the guns and goons. He had protection. Even when they completed James Meredith's March Against Fear 50 years ago, back in 1966, when Dr. King and them was marching down Highway 51, you had the Deacons for Defense that acted as security detail for Dr. King. Once again, Dr. King had armed protection when doing the March Against Fear. Dr. King had armed protection when he used to come to Memphis. But here's the thing. The chief and stuff was replaced. The person who ran the police and fire departments was Frank Holloman. Frank Holloman was for 25 years J. Edgar Hoover's number 3 man. He was the number 3 man up in D.C. for J. Edgar Hoover for 25 years. So he ended up taking over the Memphis police and fire departments when Dr. King made his last visits here. So Dr. King had no protection. So think about that. Think about it. So would a Billy Cows have that power to not give Dr. King the protection he needed? And also, Dr. King hotel room was announced on television. The Memphis news media announced the exact location where Dr. King was staying right before his assassination. Dr. King did not stay at the Lorraine Motel. That's a popular myth. He normally would stay at like the Holiday Inn. Matter of fact, Holiday Inn was founded in Memphis by Kemmons Wilson. So that's things people don't know. He didn't really stay at the Lorraine Motel that much. But I think he was guilt tripped into staying into Lorraine because people said, why are you going to stay in the white hotels or motels if you want to stay at the black motel? So he was guilt tripped to that. And matter of fact, his room was actually a secluded room. It was not on their balcony. It was in a secluded area that would been hard to get a easy shot at Dr. King, a kill shot. So somebody from his entourage changed his room. They told the hotel owner to change his room to the room 306 so they get a better shot, a clear shot, as somebody infamously recalled. Dr. King, matter of fact, his itinerary secretary, the person who was responsible for his movements at the SCLC, he was paid FBI informant. So it was a guy that was responsible for his logistics who was on the payroll for not only the SCLC, but also the FBI. So it's a rabbit hole. It gets real, crazy. And also people don't understand, Dr. King family was under government surveillance for three generations. Started with his maternal grandfather. Dr. King family was under surveillance by the U.S. government for three generations. That means they probably had spies at Morehouse when he was going there when he started at 15. That he thought were classmates and teachers. They were actually spying on Dr. King. So why do these white people or white power people know who our people are before we know who they are? That's fascinating. Why do they know who you are before you ever have an understanding of who you are? So that's something to look into. And also Dr. King's family suffered a lot of tragedy. Like the next year, his brother who loved him, who honored his brother, A.D. King, was found dead in a swimming pool with his suit on. And he could swim, but they found him dead. I guess they said it was an accident. And then a couple years after that, Dr. King's mom was killed at the piano organ at Ebenezer Church. A black gunman who identified himself as a Hebrew Israelite came into the church and started shooting up the place and killed Dr. King's mom while she was playing songs at the organ or at the piano. So there's a lot of things that we don't know about. The only thing new, like I said, what Harry Truman said, is the history you don't know. So there's a lot of things I'm telling you right now that a lot of y'all might not be aware of, but you can research this online and other sources, and you can start connect the dots. So there's a lot of things to be said about this, but I say all this to say, this system for black people produce a lot of self-hate and self-hurt. There's a reason why we are the largest consumers of products in this system. It's like the people that consume the most have the most hurt. And you always looking for something from the outside to stimulate you or to make you feel better about your conditions. So we must take it upon ourselves as black people to start instilling knowledge of self in our kids and in ourselves. Like Malcolm said, only a fool will let the primary educators of their children be their enemies. Only a fool will let the primary educators of their children be their enemy. And we got to recognize that it's the time. Time is now. We can't worry about what we didn't done or how we should have done it. We got to do what's right now. Like an old wise man once told me, first you get the calf, then you get the cow, then you get the bull. Once again, first you get the calf, the baby, then you get the cow, the woman, and then you get the bull, the man. We got to find a way to reunite the black man, woman, and child. That's the real holy trinity. The black man, woman, and child. When we was together, we had movements that moved mountains. Like even with the Montgomery bus boycott movement that put Dr. King on the map. A lot of people don't know that one of the reasons why there was a bus boycott was not just because we want to sit in the front of the bus. It was because black women were being violated by white police officers and bus drivers. They were being violated. And then black men said, enough is enough. I came back home from World War II and the Korean War. I'm fighting injustice abroad. I'm fighting to make the world safe for democracy. But it's not even safe for my old lady to walk down the street while one of you evil bastards touching her and violating her. Go back to September 3rd, 1944, outside of Montgomery. A sister named Reese Taylor was gang raped by 6 white men coming home from church with her friend. Although the white men confessed to raping this black woman, nobody would indict or convict these white men. So they got away with it. But it was a person sent to investigate what happened to Reese Taylor from the NAACP in Montgomery. That person's name was Sister Rosa Parks, who was a revolutionary activist. She was not a reactionary. She was a revolutionary. She was an activist. She was trained at the Highlander School. So she was sent to investigate that, what happened to Reese Taylor back in 1944. And so you got 11 years later, the Montgomery bus boycott. And I say the Montgomery bus boycott is probably one of the most important achievements of the whole movement, because we still don't understand what really occurred there. The Montgomery bus boycott was successful for 381 straight days. No black person rode a city bus. No black person. There's a couple things that went on there. One thing is that you had strong grassroots organizing. You had Sister Joanne Robinson with her women's group, and you also had Brother E.D. Nixon, the president of the Pullman Porters and the NAACP at the time. They helped to organize stuff logistically. You also had a black media presence. Dr. King spoke about the importance of black radio at a DJ convention back in 1967 in Atlanta. He was talking about how the black radio in Montgomery was used to help send out coded messages to the people. So that was very important to be able to control your media, because when you control your media, you can control your message, and you can control your destiny. So another thing, you also had a strong black business class. You had black folks that did for self, and they was able to combine their financial economic resources to help each other out in times of need. And a story that people don't know about from that movement was that S.B. Fuller, who was at that time, S.B. Fuller was the wealthiest black person in America, and A.G. Gaston was probably the wealthiest black man in Alabama. He was very pivotal in Operation or the Birmingham campaign. He was the one that when Dr. King and the SCLC needed a hotel to stay in, they stayed in his hotels during that Birmingham campaign. When they needed somebody to bail them out, he bailed them out. But S.B. Fuller and A.G. Gaston approached Dr. King and said that the city is losing money on the buses, and they want to sell the buses to us. Let us buy these buses. And Dr. King, he was still in his 20s, he said no. Now you fast forward to April 3rd, 1968, the so-called mountaintop speech. Dr. King was talking about, let's invest in black businesses. Let's invest in black insurance companies and banks and whatnot. Stop buying from places that won't hire you. He said boycott Coca-Cola and Hart's Bread and Wonder Bread. What good is it to eat at a restaurant when I can't afford the hamburger? So he was talking about economic empowerment and black self-help when he died. And there's another thing I want to add to this, what I think is very important when we talk about black self-help. You look at the Mississippi freedom movement of the 50s and 60s. Now, when them black people, people don't realize a lot of them people that were activists in Mississippi, a lot of them were entrepreneurs and business owners. And they had, they were farmers, they owned gas stations, they owned different things. And so the White Citizen Council, the Sovereignty Commission, froze their credit to put an economic hurt on them. So their credit was frozen. And then the Tri-State Bank in Memphis, along with the NAACP, helped extend a line of credit to those black business owners and activists down in Mississippi. This is why it's so important to have control of your economics, because if you don't control your economics, if you don't control your food path, if you don't control your education, then somebody else will end up controlling you. So this is a message that we need to get out of this. You know, a lot of people looking to point fingers of what happened to Dr. King on April 4th, 1968. A lot of people lay blame at other black folks, but there's enough blame to go around. But the most important thing that people must remember is that we must learn from these lessons. We must study them very intensely and with intent and purpose to do better, to go beyond. Because a lot of us are stuck in the past, but we're not even stuck in the past, we're stuck in a fantasy world, because we think we know the past, but the past is never past. So we're still dealing with the same stuff that they dealt with, but it's only amplified. And there's another thing that people miss out on, what they was fighting for. The economy was expanding. It was a historic expansion of the economy. That means if I dropped out of high school, I was able to get a factory job, I could support a family of 4, I could retire, nice pension, I could send my kids to college. Those days are long gone. This is a different reality. So people trying to replicate the 60s will be shit out of luck, because it won't happen like that. Because Malcolm could only exist for that time. A Medgar Evers could only exist for that time. A Fannie Lou Hamer could only exist for that time. A Dr. King could only exist of that time. They are a product of their time. So we must realize what we got to deal with right now. What are the things that are necessary for us to create a different paradigm, a different reality. So with that said, I will advise people to read An Act of State by Dr. William Pepper. Dr. William Pepper is interesting because he was a close friend of Dr. King, and also he ended up becoming James Earl Ray's lawyer. You know, and James Earl Ray never had a trial. People don't understand that James Earl Ray never had a trial. So he pleaded guilty, whatever, but he never had a trial. And he died April 23rd, 1998. So the King family got with Dr. William Pepper and they pressed for a civil trial. They sued Lloyd Jowers, who was the restaurant owner behind the hotel or motel, who said that he was a contact guy for the mob for the hit on Dr. King. And December 8th, 1999, in a court of law, the jury came back with a verdict of guilty, that the government was complicit in the assassination of Dr. King. So go back to December 8th, 1999, the civil court ruling in Memphis. Google it up and get all this information and save it in a safe place. Also, another thing I'd like to add as well is that during these type of assassinations or crucifixions, the powers that be always contaminate the crime scene. For example, as soon as Dr. King was killed a little bit after 6 o'clock p.m. April 4th, 1968 on a Thursday, somebody got up to the balcony and started wiping away the blood evidence. Somebody was soap and watering down the blood evidence. And also the next day, the trees and the bushes was cut down in the courtyard, because a lot of people, including Reverend James Orange, Dr. King's right-hand man, lieutenant, one of his lieutenant, as well as a brother named Caldwell from the New York Times, people claim they saw smoke coming from the bushes, the bush area. So they basically knocked down all the trees and bushes by the courtyard the next day. So this is not unusual. For example, you go back to February 21st, 1965, the crime scene was contaminated. A black church was allowed to have a dance just several hours after Malcolm X was assassinated in the Audubon Ballroom. Let me repeat this. On the same day that Malcolm was killed in front of his family, friends, and admirers, a black church was allowed to have a dance that same night in the same room. You go back to Dallas, November 22nd, 1963, the limousine that JFK, President John F. Kennedy, was driving in was basically contaminated. They stripped it down, whatever, they wiped away the evidence, got rid of the bullets, and they shipped it back to the manufacturer to be reupholstered. So this is what these people do. And they've been doing it since the beginning of time, since the days of Caesar. So, stay woke, everybody. So ask yourself this: who is the real enemy? Who is the real threat? And always remember that it's always an inside job. Remember once more that it's always an inside job. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy realist. Or like my friend, the late John Judge would say, what would he say? What would brother John Judge say? He's an alternate historian. So look at me as an alternate historian as well. So I say all that to say thank you all for listening to me. The best is yet to come. If you like what you heard, feel free to subscribe, donate, and pass it along. And in the words of Great Duke Ellington, we love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing.
Pretty good, bro.